Okay, we're live. We are live. Live and in color. I am representing Team Canada in the Four Nations tournament today with my Connor McDavid, 97, the assistant captain, because we know that the captain is 87.
No doubt.
Sid, and that's just so. Even Connor McDavid said that's a no-brainer. It's Sid.
I think that was the easiest decision.
That was the easiest decision of all the leadership of all the countries. Was making Sid the captain.
No.
All right. So. All right.
All right. Well, welcome back to the Best Boy Center Ice podcast. This is Barry and Carson. I'm just kidding. Barry and Carson. Weekly show we do, talking our hockey stuff. We do this usually every Tuesday around 5:45, 6 o'clock Central Time, just to talk the NHL, our teams, Pittsburgh and Edmonton, what's kind of going on in the weeks for those teams, but mainly the league stuff as well. But, of course, we wouldn't be where we are without some help or support.
Right. We'd like to thank the Refocused Radio Network, which has some great content on it, including us. Our YouTube channel is on there. So you can get this particular podcast starting tomorrow. You can go back and listen to other podcasts that we've done on the Refocused Radio Network. That's refocusedradio.com. On there as well is our really good friend Rudy Campos Jr. and Sweep the League. Shemaya Reed and the I Am Refocused Radio Pro podcast is on there, and there's got some more stuff coming up in the new year here in the next couple of months that will really be adding to this network as the network continues to grow.
Expand.
You can also get us on a podcast on the site Spreaker.com and our YouTube channel, Best Boy Center Ice Podcast YouTube. And we also, I still do some stuff on TikTok post game sometimes. And but you can get us here on Facebook as well. And we'd love for you to reach out to us via Facebook or via whatever other way, social media that you can connect with Carson or I. And we'd like to hear from you about your team, how your team's faring as we are getting towards, what would traditionally be the All-Star break, but the Four Nations break. Where you think your team is. Are you happy with where your team is? Where you think your team is going? Are they going up? Are they going down? And also, are they going to be buyers or sellers when it comes to the trade deadline that's coming up? So we want to hear from you there. And we'd love for you to join us tonight. Beth is joining us again tonight. Hi, Beth. And we'd love for you to join us as well. So last week we switched up the format a little bit. We started talking about the NHL, what was going on. And we're going to do that again because there were some, like we already mentioned the big trade last week, but there's some more stuff going on.
There is
in the NHL. We're going to start with that, and then we'll move into the week that was.
Yeah, the NHL this week was just to create. I'll set the precedent. The sports world in general this week was crazy.
Oh, it was nuts.
You had the biggest, obviously the biggest whole thing was the Luka Doncic trade, which, okay, I'm going to speak on that for just a second, even though we're a hockey show. How do you trade your franchise cornerstone? I know that they had Dirk Nowitzki back in the day, won a championship in 2011, I believe, with Dallas, but Luka was a top 5 player in the league. And how do you trade your cornerstone piece of your franchise away without him having any notice of it? Plenty of reports coming out that he had just bought a home in Dallas. So he had all the intentions of staying with Dallas. He had made it clear that he wanted to stay for his entire career and be a Dallas Maverick. And a week after closing on a home, he gets a call at 11:30 p.m. on a Saturday night that he's been traded to LA, which, I mean, isn't obviously a bad place to go, but geez, like, how often nowadays do you get loyalty out of sports athletes? And he's one of those guys that wanted to stick with them forever. And that's just something I think that's going to affect the whole sports world, because now it's making anybody's available. Because as somebody like that, who is a top 5 player in their respective sport, getting traded for really what right now is going to rip Dallas off so bad. But yeah, I mean, that was the big talk of the week in general for sports. It was probably the biggest trade that's happened in a long time.
I can't remember a bigger trade in any of the 4 major
You have a
sports.
hard time scrolling anything without seeing something.
I want to bring something else up too, as we are bringing up the trade. One, everybody's blaming Mark Cuban. Mark Cuban is not the majority owner of the Dallas Mavericks anymore. He gave that up last year or the year before. So he didn't make this decision. As much as I don't like,
he wouldn't have made that decision.
He wouldn't have made this decision. I don't like him as a person, because I have met him on a couple of occasions. But as a businessman, I think he's one of the more brilliant businessmen that brought himself up from nothing. But he had nothing to do with this, folks. He's not the majority owner, and he would not have made this deal. You go back to Dirk a few years ago. He was looking at free agency. He was looking at San Antonio. He was looking at some other places, but he stayed in Dallas. Tim Duncan, early in his career, he was thinking about going to Orlando, but he decided to stay in San Antonio and was very successful. So now you get the Luka deal here, where you have your cornerstone guy, young guy, a guy who's going to be there for you for many, many years, got you to the finals last year, got you to the conference finals the year before, and now you trade him. And now Luka personally, because he was traded, is going to lose out on about $350 million. Okay, I'm not a big guy of the professional athletes getting that much money, but he's going to lose because he got traded to the Lakers, the Kings. He got traded to the Lakers. He's going to lose $350 million in what he could have signed for, because his contract was coming up, but he indicated he wanted to sign.
And you know what? He's one of my favorite athletes.
Yeah,
I feel like just the way he holds himself. I mean, he's a great player and one of those just guys that just gets it done. But like I mentioned, you don't see loyalty in sports much anymore, and very rarely do you see it go the other way. And the whole team, the organization, the whole team, him, the fans were completely betrayed, and that's not something you see go the other way. But it sucks for the guys going back to Dallas, because they're going to be the ones getting the brunt of that, and it's not on them. They're not mad at them. They're mad at the team. And I've already seen so many people seen reports. So many people are canceling their season tickets because they're pissed off at the Mavericks for doing that. Yeah. And as they should be, because in the NHL world, relating it kind of back to hockey, that'd be like the Avs. I know they just traded Rantanen, but trading McKinnon away for peanuts. Not saying that Anthony Davis is a bad player. He's a great player. But
he's about 5 years away out of.
Well, and he's injury prone. He's had so many injury problems, but he's a great player when he's healthy. But that's like trading McKinnon away. That's like y'all trading McDavid away in his prime. That's like us trading Sid away in his prime. A guy that's one of the top players in the league is that guy, and he's never going back to Dallas. I mean, I wouldn't, because you don't it's not on the fans, but it's on the org. Like, they just treat him like garbage.
And Carson's right, and saying that this was just an unbelievable. Like, I couldn't believe it when I saw because we had just been talking about the Rantanen trade and thinking that was a huge one. But
the circumstances of this one, there being no conversations between anybody about this. He had no idea it was coming. It just happened, and he just has to be told, bye-bye. You got to get on a plane and go to LA, and the other way, they got to fly and go to Dallas.
I guess, when you look at it from the Lakers' point of view, they've got just a small window with LeBron being there and trying to get another championship.
Now, what that does for the city of Dallas is, number one, it gives them two people that are owners or management of a team that they can't stand. People of Dallas can't stand Jerry Jones, and now they're not going to like Nico Harrison either because of this trade. So now, what does that do for the Stars? Because now the fan support for the Stars has got to be going through the roof now, because that's the only team in Dallas now that people can pin their hopes on, or that they're going to want to support.
Yeah, and like the Rangers, the Texas Rangers too,
won the World Series.
But I think. Yeah, you know what? I never thought about it, but I think this is a good thing for the Stars.
It could be a good
for
thing
the Rangers.
I mean, I feel sorry for those people. I mean, I hate seeing trades in general. It's always sucks, but people that, this Luka is like their Sidney Crosby. Yeah. He's like their McDavid for the younger generation that didn't get the chance to experience what Dirk was. Now they get that, and they have the opportunity to watch that grow. And it's just thrown away. And
the Mavericks and the city of Dallas were so lucky, because they went from
Dirk right
into Luka. And I mean, Luka played with Dirk a little bit, but they went in from one superstar into another, kind of got better.
Very, very rarely you see that being able to happen in an organization. Not every organization in in sports has had the fortune of having a legacy player, and they had that and they threw it away.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wanted to start with that because that was the shock of the world, but relating to the hockey world of it, that no player is to be safe, to be honest, because no one expected him to go, and it wasn't on his own appeal. It just happened.
Like you could have looked at last year when there was talk about what are the Oilers going to do with Leon Draisaitl, because he had a big contract coming up. He could have been traded, which would have been devastating.
But I can't see any management in the NHL doing that to their player, trading him without even telling him about it, or asking or talking to him about it.
Like with Draisaitl, they asked him, if you go somewhere, where would you want to go? And with this, it was just like Carson said, a phone call at 11:30 at night saying you're on a plane to LA. So I know we don't talk about the other sports very much, but this impacts all the sports.
And I'm really upset about this trade. I mean, just looking more and more into it, that he bought a house, and so did Anthony Davis, just bought a house in Bel Air. So you have these conversations. Mm-hmm. There's no way that these guys don't have an idea that he's done that.
Right.
They have these conversations. They know that. So that he has himself set into living there. And that doesn't just affect him. That affects his family, his kids. If he has children, like if they're younger, they have to go and find new friends and meet new people. Like, that's not easy.
No.
Despite being who you are, that's not easy. But yeah, this affects the whole sports world for sure. And I'm just interested to see what kind of moves happen in the NHL regarding this. I don't think anything of this magnitude will happen, or the circumstances where there's not going to be conversation.
Yeah, you may see bigger guys get traded,
but not like this with conversation and agreements. But with that kind of gone over now, we just had to start with that because that really is a big story. Moving into the NHL news, and then we'll start getting towards the weeks for the Edmonton Oilers, Pittsburgh Penguins. First, big news just came out today about Miro Heiskanen for Dallas, out month to month. Unfortunately, he had to have surgery in New York City today. So wish the best for him and his recovery. He's one of those guys, just such an elite defenseman and such a great player to watch. It's unfortunate he won't be playing in the Four Nations because he was going to be such a big piece in there for Finland. But you know what? That is so crappy. You know what? The Stars lose such a great player, their best defenseman, off of a crappy play.
Very cheap.
Yes. And
play.
You know what? I can't defend anybody that says he got tripped into him. Yes, there was minor interference on Stone, but he dove into him. He didn't just fall down.
Yeah, if you look at the replay, and we've seen the replay a bunch of times, he dove into his leg. And we talked about this. I think we talked about this last week. It's like, that's intent to injure. Yeah. You don't, as a player, as a professional athlete, that's your bread and butter. That's your living. You don't take somebody's living away from them, because what happens if he can't come back 100%?
And he might not. I mean, that's a big thing to go through surgery. And that team, you know what? This is one of the circumstances that I hope, because they're going to get around $13 million in LTIR space, because he's going to be out basically the rest of the regular season, if not into the playoffs. That's saying month to month, that they're going to evaluate on a monthly basis of how he's doing. He'll be lucky to skate by mid-March, and that's not much time before but I pray to God on this circumstance that the Stars really take advantage of this LTIR and just give it to Vegas, because that is ridiculous. You can't allow that to happen. And the league, how can you allow that to happen and not do anything about it? Like, that's
didn't get
crazy.
Suspended or anything?
No, not even a fine, nothing.
No. This is why the Las Vegas Golden Knights are one of the, if not the most hated franchise in the NHL, because of the long-term IR issues they've had the last couple of years with Mark Stone. Now they have become the team that everybody loves to hate.
Yeah.
And even though I went to Vegas and watched, I like
their fan. They're great
fan base. I love their fan base. I love what they do.
And some of their players. I mean, like you look at like William Karlsson. I love watching him play. I like watching Aiden Hill. He's a great goalie.
He's a great goaltender.
Pietrangelo. I've always liked Pietrangelo.
And
they have great players. They have great players, but it's mainly just Mark Stone. Okay, like, I get it. The LTIR thing, it's legal, but it's annoying, and especially when there was really nothing that looked like it happened when he was out for so long, and then all of a sudden by game one he's healthy.
Yeah.
So there's just like backstory stuff or backside stuff going on that he's practicing. But yeah, I just hope the Stars take advantage of it. I've seen that a lot of people have linked that possibly Carlson could be going to Dallas now, which would be interesting if he did.
Yeah.
But yeah, crappy thing to have happen for that team in general. He's one of their best players and just such a great player and good representation for the sport. And it's unfortunate to see that, but hopefully he's okay soon and he's able to be back for them for the playoffs, because
you can only hope that his recovery is quicker, that he can be skating. I
would hope that by game 1 he's ready, but I feel like the Stars 2 are such a good team that they could make it through the first round without him.
Yeah,
I really do think so. But hopefully they use the LTIR to their advantage. Speaking of this whole thing with Heiskanen, Minnesota's Ryan Hartman today was gifted a 10-game suspension for intent to injure on Saturday night against Tim Stützle in Ottawa. I mean, rightfully called. That was definitely a crappy play too. That was dirty.
Roughing, and I just before the show started, I was rewatching it, and he did put his arm down. That's
not a hockey play, and as much I'm not a big Stützle fan, I feel like he is kind of a bit of a diver, but yeah, you don't do that. I mean, that's hockey 101. That's not in the game. I think that's honestly pretty long suspension. I didn't think it was going to be that long, but you know what?
So they give him 10,
right? But they don't give
Stone anything.
So you don't set the right precedent, I don't think, because you allow things like that to happen, and you don't do anything. But then vice versa. Okay, so rightfully so, he should be suspended, Hartman, for that, absolutely. But you have to give it both ways. Then how is Stone able to not get suspended or any punishment for that incident that causes Dallas to lose their best player? Arguably one of their best players. But
this is a conspiracy theory, but you know how everybody talks about in the NFL, the Kansas City Chiefs and the refs, they have the refs in their pockets. I think Vegas has the NHL in their pocket.
They've made them a lot.
How else could you give Connor McDavid a 3-game suspension for the cross check, which was granted?
Yes.
And
Myers got a 2.
Myers got a 2. So okay,
it was even. Fair.
It was even. But then you get 10 games here for
roughing. It was technically what it was called for.
And then you get for nothing for a guy who intently went after a player's leg, and now that player is going to be out month. I think the NHL should, if the player gets injured seriously, they have to take that into consideration. If this player is out for a month, Mark Stone should be out for a month. It's like the punishment should fit the crime.
Yeah, and I mean,
not break his leg. No, but if
but that impacts Dallas, it really does.
Does.
And it could hurt them, even as far because we know they're a playoff team. That's not a doubt. But it could affect them as far as seeding. They might not get as many points because there's instances that
because they could be on the road instead of at home.
But I hope. I mean, that would be crazy if they meet up in the first round again like they did last year, because that's going to be bad in Dallas. They're going to be booing him. But yeah, I just don't like that. Crazy. But anyways, back to some more trade news. Vancouver was involved in a couple of trades this last week. JT Miller finally got the boot out of Vancouver, heads back to the Rangers in exchange. The Canucks get back Victor Mancini, who's the younger D-man from the Rangers, as well as Philip Hedl. Great trade for both sides. I mean, Hedl's a great player when he's healthy. He's just had a lot of injury problems. JT Miller has already looked pretty good as a Ranger.
Yeah, he got his first goal in his first game.
Yep, he had 2 actually. 2 goals.
Yeah.
So great fit for both teams. JT Miller, I feel like he'll fit in fine with the Rangers, be able to be that guy. And I don't think he has to have that much pressure on him, because really there's so many other guys there that are going to take more pressure, like Zibanejad, Panarin, etc. But I've been thinking about this since that trade. Is he the problem there, or is it Pettersson? Because I feel like Pettersson has never really lived up to that hype of what he's supposed to be. Oh. And I feel like he just...
And we talked about that last week, is that he had all this potential, and then he's not lived up to that. He's lived up to it in bits and pieces.
And I'm not saying that Pettersson's a bad player. Pettersson is a very talented individual. He's a great player, but he's never, I feel like, lived up to the hype of what he was supposed to be. And I'm wondering if this is going to be the trade that they got rid of the wrong guy.
Yeah.
Because I feel like JT Miller was a great player for Vancouver, despite all the allegations about like being a locker room cancer. He was such a great player for them, and he was consistently on the score sheet. And I mean, heck, when I watched the game over there this year, that game I went to was almost in November, and Pettersson hadn't scored a goal yet until that game.
I think Pettersson is a lazy hockey player. He's talented, but he's lazy.
He doesn't
work hard enough. If he doesn't get what he wants shot wise or whatever, he's lazy. He doesn't work for it.
I feel like though the Canucks could get a good return for him if they trade him, because he is still a talented player that could fit well. But you'll see what they end up doing with that. But yeah, that's going to be a good trade for both teams. Philip Hedl scored already in the first game that he played with Vancouver. I like his energy. He's a great player, just had a lot of injury problems, and he's got a lot of concussion problems.
Yeah.
Another trade they were involved in. Unfortunately, saw a couple of my guys go in that trade. But you knew it was bound to happen. The Penguins and Canucks make a trade. Marcus Pettersson and Drew O'Connor go to Vancouver in exchange. The Penguins get Vinny Desharnais, a prospect, a first-round draft pick as well. That was in part of the Miller trade. Mm-hmm. And then we get good old Danton Heinen back. Mm-hmm. You know what? Great trade for both sides again, because the Canucks get a great left-handed defenseman in Pettersson, who is smart. Maybe doesn't put up great offensive numbers, but he's a very talented defensive defenseman. He was the best defenseman, in my opinion, on the Penguins when he was there. And then they also get Drew O'Connor, a speedy forechecking forward that I think can fit in their bottom six pretty well. I just find he sometimes had the problem of being too inconsistent on the score sheet, and I think sometimes was maybe a bit too quick for his own good, but I feel like he'll have a solid role in Vancouver. Meanwhile, the other way, Heinen, we get him back. I liked him when we had him. Great bottom six guy. They've used him on the second line the other night. We still haven't had Gino back. He's still out after he got hurt in Seattle, so that'll be interesting to see if he gets maybe put on the second line. I would like to see a line of him, Malkin, and Bunting, just to see what that looks like. But he looked good the other night, and Desharnais did pretty well, in my opinion, his debut. I think a more physical defenseman that the Penguins don't have, and they finally got that.
If Vinny can be the way he was last year for the Oilers, especially in the playoffs with his he's just a long guy. He's
6'7". He's ridiculous.
He can get a stick involved in all of that. If he can play like he did last year in the playoffs for the Penguins, and that's what Vancouver was looking to get, and they didn't get that from him.
I feel like, though, that's going to be a perfect role for him, because he's going to be that big physical defenseman that we don't have. We finally got it. And then Heinen, again, like I mentioned, the first-round pick's huge as well. That gives us, I believe, 15 picks already within the next 3 drafts. So that's great for our development. Yeah. I'm really more interested to see what Heinen does again, because I liked him. He's had a very interesting career path too. He started in Boston, and then he went to Pittsburgh, then went back to Boston, then went to Vancouver, and now he's back in Pittsburgh again. But I'm also excited for Desharnais. I'm just concerned about our defensive core. It's honestly not that great with Pettersson being traded now, but hopefully they can make some moves to get some more reliable guys in there.
And Vancouver now has 3 Petterssons.
Yep, they have to, and it's crazy the way that now they have to have like the initials too on the front. So Pettersson, Elias Pettersson's just Pettersson. The other one also starts with an E, so he's E Pettersson, and he's like number 30 something or whatever. And then Marcus Pettersson's M Pettersson, number 29. But it's sad to see guys like that go. I mean, mainly Marcus Pettersson for me, because he's been on this team for like 7-8 years, and he grew into his own. He started out and he was not honestly very good his first year or two, and he really grew into his own and became such a reliable player and seemed like such a likable guy. Sid texted Rick Tocchet after the trade and told him that he was getting 2 great players in O'Connor and 2 great people in O'Connor and Pettersson, but a great leader in Pettersson. So I could see him possibly being like an alternate captain maybe next season, because he's a great leader and a great guy. Seems like a great locker room fit, but sad to see him go. But you know what? Good to get something for him, because I didn't feel like he was going to re-sign. I mean, those are 2 big trades for the NHL this week. I don't see them being done either. Pittsburgh mainly, but there's a lot of moves that are going to go on here.
And I think the Oilers are still looking at, and I'll bring that up when I talk about the Oilers, about Jeff Skinner. One last thing around the NHL. Congratulations to Jonathan Quick. He becomes the first American-born goaltender to win 400
One
games.
of the more consistent goalies in NHL history. He's such a great goal. I mean, still aging, and he's still so good.
He was the big reason why they won. The LA
Kings
won 2 cups.
Yep. Congratulations to him. Great goalie. I love watching him play. Again, New York's lucky to have a great tandem like
Jonathan
that.
Quick was always at a thorn in the side of the Edmonton Oilers. He always brought his game up to a different level.
New York's very lucky to have great tandem. Also, So congratulations too to Ricard Raquel getting named to Team Sweden.
Team Sweden.
So we now got 3 reps for the 4 nations now, with Sid being in Canada, EK65, and Raquel. Raquel deserves it. I mean, he had such a bad season last year, just rough season, and now he's really turned on the Jets this year. I think he's one of those, I don't want to say underrated, but fly under the radar guys, where he just sneakily puts up numbers, and he's such a great fit for this team. But I'm excited to see him play. He deserves it. Much deserved for him to earn this honor.
Right now, still just 2 Oilers in the 4 nations, Connor McDavid and Mattias Ekholm for Sweden. So that's coming up, and that's coming up pretty quick as we're getting basically into the last week of this part of the regular season.
Yep. But yeah, I mean, the NHL this week. One big thing too that happened today, maybe not as much NHL related, but the IIHF, or International Hockey Federation, is still has extended Russia and Belarus's ban from playing in international events through 2026. So they don't get to play in the World Juniors, any of those kind of tournaments, international tournaments, they're banned. It's still up to the Olympic Committee whether Russia will be able to participate in 2026. But it doesn't look like they're going to be able to, which is sad because, yes, I mean, I get the political stance of all that for sure, but there's just so much talent there, but it's unfortunate, but I get it. You got to keep the peace.
There's a lot of talented Russian players that are not being able to play.
And I mean, like, it sucks.
And it's not on them because let's put it this way. Most of these guys, they spend more than half the year in either the United States or Canada. So they're not home. No. And but this goes back to the 80s when Iran invaded, and the Americans boycotted the 80 Olympics, and the Soviets were going to boycott.
And even looking how far it was games for the Soviets to defect, they had to finally begin defecting and sneaking out to come. So
this is why, when you see this thing like the 4 nations, you're missing out on a lot of great players.
That
aren't playing because of this the political side of things.
I'm hoping they'll be able to participate in the Olympics because if not, you won't see Ovi in the Olympics again. You won't see Gino in the Olympics again. It's going to suck. But we'll see what they come out with that decision. But busy week again in the NHL. You're going to see it being busy pretty much the most part for the rest of the regular season.
Right.
There's going to be a lot of action. I feel like that still goes on during the 4 nations break. Obviously, as of the 8th, there's no more NHL for 2 weeks. We'll still be here covering, obviously, the 4 nations tournament, but as of the 8th, no more NHL.
I think it's the 22nd is when they come back.
And that's when I'll be in Pitt.
That's when you'll be in Pittsburgh.
So, crazy week, but now we'll kind of go back to, again, our usual start. We kind of started switching that up to get a different feel because especially the last couple of weeks, there's been a lot more NHL news than anything else.
That we'll go over what the Penguins did and what the Oilers did,
but sometimes there's a lot that
gets trumped by what's going on in the league itself.
I guess I'll go ahead.
Yeah, you go ahead and start.
So, I see we talked last week. The Penguins just didn't have a very good couple of weeks. Stemming from when I went to Pittsburgh the first time, they had just lost a lot of games. Did really not very great on the road trip, on the homestand they had right before the road trip. Really kind of took themselves out of a decent spot in the playoffs. But last week, you know what? The Penguins turned it on and played really well. They only played 2 games, but they won both of them. Giving themselves a shot in the arm, I feel like, to do something. But they started out on Wednesday in Utah to play the Utah Hockey Club for the first time at the Delta Center, and the Penguins come out on top in overtime 3-2. This was an interesting game. I didn't watch really that much of the beginning of it, but Utah started the scoring off, and then the Penguins tied the game. Ironically, Marcus Pettersson's last goal in Pittsburgh is the tying goal, 1-1. Then Utah scores again later in the second period. EK65 ties it up, and then a beautiful overtime goal from Sid.
That was
vintage Sid off the bench backhand. He cut through right the goal crease and just backhanded it. Huge win for the team. You could tell by his celebration. That was a big goal for the team, really. You need a win to finish off a road trip, and they got it, especially against a team that really dismantled them in Pittsburgh earlier this year. Then the Penguins headed back home Saturday. We're starting to see the games for them kind of space out a little bit because they've played so many more games that finally they're now getting a couple days break between games. So they had a couple of days off going back home to play Nashville on Saturday, and they played one of those games like they did against the Kings, where it was just a complete effort. All 60 minutes, pretty much the Penguins had control. There were flurries in the third where Nashville had some chances, but the Penguins shut them down. They finally get their first shutout of the season. Nedeljkovic got that. Sid gets 2 points in this game, so he's had a good week, 4 points. Tomasino scores. Again, one of those guys that just great move for Dubas to get him for basically peanuts. I mean, he's been such a great fit. And like I mentioned, Desharnais and Heinen look great in the lineup again, helping this team win. They played such a great game, and you know what? I like the response after the trade. They played really good after trading away 2 guys that are really important to this team and the guys that are in that room, and they still played really well. And again, kudos to Heinen and Desharnais getting really a turnaround of within 24 hours. They were traded from Vancouver, had to fly all the way to Pittsburgh to play. And well, actually, you know what? They would have been flying from Dallas, but nonetheless, that's not easy. And they came in, met new guys, had to get used to a new system, and they played great and won. Nedeljkovic has been rock solid for this team. The Penguins, like I mentioned, got to win a lot of games, but they've pulled themselves back into the thick of it a little bit. They're not too far away. Some of the teams in the East have lost a little bit, so the Penguins can make some ground up. You never know. Again, there's still almost 30 games. That's a lot of games. But they're trending in the right direction. That's for sure. Just the big thing's going to be just defensively, how they can hold up the rest of the way. I'm really still excited to watch these games. They've still got 3 more left before the Four Nations break. They're in action right now against the Devils, which is a bugaboo team, but they're at home. So I'm fingers crossed that when I check the score after the show is over, that they'll be up or at least tied. And then they have a back-to-back ending off before the Four Nations. Their next 7 games are actually against Metro teams, all of them. So big stretch for this team. They play against the Devils tonight, and then they head on the road for a back-to-back. They play in New York on Friday, and then they head to Philly for the first time this season to play the Flyers. I'm excited to watch both those games. Hopefully they come out on top. After that, they have 2 weeks off, and then they have a back-to-back weekend against Washington on Saturday, New York on Sunday, which, again, I'll be at the games for those. I haven't seen the Penguins play a divisional team yet, so I'm excited to see the atmosphere.
I think I'm going to give you money for a Washington puck.
Absolutely,
because I like Washington better than New York.
Yeah,
and see, I've got this hockey puck collection that started with Carson and I going to Dallas games. Even when he goes to Pittsburgh, I get him to give me one of the pucks.
And I'm excited. Like those games are both national games, they're both TV games, so they're going to be more important. But for me, they're important because how's the team going to respond after the Four Nations? Yeah. You have 2 weeks off, reset. You're in the final stretch of the season. You're playing for pride. You're trying to make the playoffs, of course. But we'll see what happens. But, we'll see what they look like. Hopefully they can win at least 2 out of these last 3 before the Four Nations, maybe in a lost scramble point if they can. That'd be huge. But don't count him out yet. Nope. Sid's been playing well. Gino's still hurt, but when he comes back, that's again another guy they can make.
See, and then when you look at the Four Nations break, like everybody gets 2 weeks off except for the players that are playing in the game. So everybody's kind of going to be in the same
even
boat.
The players. I mean, I know they still got to play games, but really they're only playing
4 games,
3 or 4 games.
They're playing 3 games, and then I guess
finals
and stuff like that, right?
So, and the Four Nations itself is going to be fun, but the Penguins just got to finish off these next 3 games strong. Again, they can put themselves right in it. There's been a lot of teams that have been losing, so they just got to keep winning because at the end of the day, you make your own fate. You can't rely on the other teams. You got to do what you got to do and win those hockey games.
Yep. Yeah. So moving on to what the Oilers did, not a great week for the Oilers. Only had a couple of games, just like the Penguins, because they only had 2 games.
Wow, that's very rare that we have a better week than you guys.
Yeah, I know, right? The Oilers, as we are on the air right now, 32-16-4, first in the Pacific. They are technically tied with Vegas, but Vegas has lost 1 more game.
You guys have more regulation with that's how the tiebreaker works. So
the Oilers are technically in first place. They went 0-1 in this past week, only a couple of games. The first game was, you know what? I was looking at the game leading up on the schedule, saying, Detroit. But Detroit's a good team now.
Well, Detroit under Todd McClellan is 14-4-1.
Yeah. So they went and they started out great. 2 first period goals, like bang, bang. The Oilers were up 2-0 and thought, okay, wow, okay. And then now was in the first period, and their better periods are second and third. Well, Detroit came back and they tied. They got into overtime and couldn't decide in overtime. And then in the shootout, Detroit got a couple of goals in the shootout, and they win.
That's just a team that's playing with so much fire right now.
That's a team, and they were At the time, they were like 2 points or something out of a playoff spot.
Yeah. And now they're first in the. Now, before you get into do you have anything more to say about this game, or can I ask a question?
Nope.
Okay, we talked about this before because I know what game we're going to talk about. I didn't know that the league can change the schedule. Like that.
So
I've seen it happen before, I guess, but it's not very often.
Okay, so here's the scenario, all right? Originally on the schedule, the Edmonton Oilers were playing the Toronto Maple Leafs a Saturday night, late hockey night in Canada. When it's in Edmonton,
it's like 9
o'clock. It's like 9 o'clock start because they're always the back end of a hockey night in Canada game when they're playing in Edmonton. Well, this game last Saturday was in Edmonton, but it was against the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, Toronto Maple Leafs, when they play on a hockey night in Canada, they play at 6 p.m. and if they're playing at home. So this game originally was scheduled
for 9 o'clock,
9 p.m. Central Time, 9 p.m. Central Time, 8 p.m. Mountain. But the Leafs come in, and all of a sudden the league decides that they want to change the time to 5 p.m. Mountain, which is local time in Edmonton, 6 p.m. here. And it was the Leafs' request. And the NHL, I don't know why, but the Leafs have the control of the NHL, so they moved the game to 5 Mountain, which when you're in Edmonton and you're used to a Saturday night game at home being 9 o'clock, you got to change your whole routine.
And it's different when we've seen it already a few times in the last month or two. On the calendar, you guys have a 3 p.m. game, but that's set on the schedule already. So you know that.
Now, when you get later into the season, much like in the NFL when they do flex scheduling, you may get, if you got a better matchup on Sunday night football, you're going to flex it. You're going to flex it. And in the NHL, I think they have done this where they look ahead and they go, man, this is going to be a really good game. We're not putting it on at,
especially like when it comes to the end, because if it comes down to like a playoff race, they're going to switch that to a TV game. But I can't believe that even happens.
So that happens. All right. And it's like I don't know if you saw Connor McDavid's interview. He was just like questioning why in their building
they get switched.
That it gets switched by a visiting team. Now, you would think that the home team would have the last say, and if that game starts at 6,
that's like you guys going to Toronto and not starting a game in Toronto until
9 o'clock. Which is, when you talk 9 o'clock Central, is 11 o'clock Eastern. Well, that's not going to ever happen because they're not going to start anything at 11 o'clock Eastern. I've always said that everything bows down to the Eastern time zone. It don't care what sport. I don't care what it is. Everything bows down to the Eastern time zone. So because they don't want people watching hockey or any kind of sport after 9, 10 o'clock starting games. Sometimes you have to do it. If your team is playing on the West Coast, that's a 3 hour. That's a brutal, but you know what? It's a part of the deal. But it's
what makes the NHL the NHL. It's a brutal schedule.
This was called and agreed. It wasn't agreed upon. The Oilers did not agree to this. It was forced on them by the NHL. So when Gary Bettman waves his magic wand, everything happened. So the game started at 6, and the Oilers, again, bad start in the first period. 2 power play goals they let in, and a 5-on-5. So they were down 3-0. All right, so that's
been a common theme.
That's a common theme for the Oilers in the first period. But they got one back, made it 3-1. The Leafs made it 4-1 on a brilliant Marner. I don't like Marner, but he had
such a great play.
But then the Oilers in the third decided to play hockey. And towards the end of the second period into the third, the Oilers started to play hockey. And they tied the game. Or no, they got it to 4-3. They went 6-on-5. And they went 6-on-5. And the play going into the zone with the 6-on-5 with Stu being pulled, went in, and Draisaitl scored this great goal. It was just a lot of excitement. It was one of his one-timers on the knee. Yeah,
but Klingberg was offside.
But they went back and looked at it, and kudos to the Leafs video staff. Klingberg was the new defenseman. He had a skate just inside. It was offside. I have to admit
it was one of those that you could tell it was like it wasn't one of those 50-50.
No.
But you know what? I mean, great call again for the Leafs video coaches to do that. But I've seen comment. I think I put comments about it myself too. I feel like if the offside doesn't affect the play, it shouldn't matter.
Because the offside
and it happened plenty before the play.
Okay, it happened a lot before the play. So play went on. I think Toronto had a chance to get it out, and they did it. If you go in on you and it's a questionable offside, and within that 5 seconds you score, then I think
But that was like 30 seconds later.
Like 30. So the Oilers got the goal taken off, but they went back 6-on-5 eventually after the faceoff, and they were in the Leaf zone the whole time.
That last save by Wall.
I don't know how he made the save, but the Oilers almost pulled it out, didn't. So they wound up just getting 1 point in those 2 games. And so again, that's where we sit going into tonight's game. Again, we talked about giving up too many first period goals.
Have been bad for you guys.
If you give up, if you're playing from behind, like I don't get like the Oilers.
It's
worst period is
easy to play from behind.
The worst period is the first. The best is the second. Their second best is the third. So they've come back and they've won. But you don't want to start down.
And for a team like the Oilers, who are such a great team, you don't want your mentality to come out of the first period. Just make sure it's 0-0 or tied.
Yeah. No, you want to be
ahead.
And the thing is, in Detroit, they were up 2-0, and then let it slip away.
I definitely think that the change in routine does make a difference because Toronto's not having to change their routine, and they're on the road.
Yeah,
I mean, I get it. You're on. If you're on the road in the Eastern time zone, nothing changes. Absolutely.
So they're still playing in their comfort zone of that Saturday night.
Well, and I don't. Even that, I've been wanting to. I don't understand why the Leafs are always playing on hockey night or on Saturday.
Because
I know they're like
This goes back to when there were only 3 Canadian teams: Vancouver, Montreal, and Toronto. So when Hockey Night in Canada came on, it was literally Hockey Night in Canada. It was one of the 3 Canadian teams at home that you saw. So if Vancouver and Montreal were on the road, you got Toronto. So Toronto's always been in the mix. So when you get all these now 7 Canadian teams, and they're all sometimes will play.
Yeah,
but Toronto gets
out every week.
Gets the prime time. Prime time is 6:00 because the tradition in Canada was Hockey Night in Canada was 6:00 Central. Okay, whatever you want to call it in the East, but 6:00 Central was Hockey Night in Canada. So that's the hallmark. That's where you want to play. You want to play Hockey Night in Canada at 6:00.
But they get it every week.
Time.
It's like
every time.
And I get it. They're a popular team, but I think I've made the opinion too that I feel like Hockey Night in Canada, yes, I guess should host or showcase the Canadian teams, but sometimes there's some great matchups between the American teams that you could show. But okay, you're telling me that people wouldn't watch Colorado and Dallas play each other on a Saturday night? They would.
But the CBC, which is the Canadian Broadcasting Company, is run by the Canadian government. So what does the Canadian government want? They want a Canadian team on the tube Saturday night, 9 o'clock or whatever. So they want a Canadian team playing on the branded Hockey Night in Canada.
I just think it's stupid. I mean, they play on it every time, every Saturday night.
You know what? To what it was, the Oilers didn't have a great week, but they're still in first place in the Pacific. Getting on to a couple of things for the Oilers. Klingberg did look good after not playing a hockey game since 2023. He looked good. I love his defensive play, and I think he made a couple of outlet passes that were just spot on, tape to tape.
You got to remember in Dallas, he was such a good offensive guy that he still has that touch. He just got to be put in the right spot for it.
I think you give him 2 or 3 more games, and he's going to be. Matthias Ekholm was out for the.
He'll be good. He'll be good for a playoff.
What I liked in the Detroit game is they put Ekholm and Klingberg together, and they put Bouchard and Nurse together.
Yeah.
They couldn't do that against the Leafs because Ekholm was out with a flu.
I think you're able to get offensive and defensive balance in both of those players. So you said you have Kulak and Bouchard, right?
No, it was Bouchard and Nurse.
Okay.
Kulak and
Emberson. So okay, those first 2 pairs you have, Ekholm and Klingberg. One great defensive player, one great offensive player. Same with the others. Nurse is more of a defensive guy. Bush is offensive. Now, regarding the game, mainly the Toronto game, because a lot of people, again, as usual, were blaming Stuart Skinner for that because he let in a lot of goals. How do you feel about him in general, confidence-wise? Do you think that he's that?
No, I have confidence. I have more confidence in Stu now than I did in previous years. But, and I was going to bring this up too, it might be a chance to see with 30 games
Calvin
left,
Pickard.
seeing Pick be the starting goaltender, because Pick goes in there and he's got a phenomenal record. He's got like 10-2-1 or
He's
something
just
like
such
that.
a calm. He's so calm.
He's so calm, and he has that style that the players aren't used to, because he's got old school style. I think, and you can look at it however you want. You can call it in behind the locker room doors that Pick's the starting goaltender. He's the number one guy. But you're going to play these guys the same amount of time. Yeah. I just think, let's just see, because Stu Skinner played better when he got pulled in the Vancouver series in the playoffs last year. He's played better. I don't know. That's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking, is it time for the Oilers to give? And then if it doesn't work, you go back.
Yeah, truthfully, I mean, even as crazy as it was that y'all just went to the finals last year, I could see this year being the end of Stuart Skinner in Edmonton. I really can. If he continues to kind of just falter like he sometimes does, I really could see that being the end of the experiment.
Yeah. And that's always a thing. And it's like,
because sometimes these goalies go to different places and they get a reset. Like, okay, like Ned in Detroit was not very good. And then he comes to us and he becomes a better goalie. And you see it happen a lot where these guys just get sent to a different team. Mm-hmm. Even Askarov for San Jose, getting a chance finally to play in the big leagues, and he's doing well. Yeah. So I could see that being a possibility for. I mean, I don't want that necessarily because I like Stuart Skinner, but I mean, sometimes it comes to a point where you got to hold it down, and sometimes it feels like he crumbles.
Well, you look at the Oilers had Cam Talbot for many, many years. And Cam looked good at the beginning of his career in Edmonton, and then it just fell apart. I like Stu. I love Stu. I think he's a great fit for the Oilers. He's a typical Edmonton Oiler guy. But how long, they went to the Stanley,
that forever.
He went to the Stanley Cup Finals. You beat Bob 3 games in the Stanley Cup Finals when you were down 0-3. But I just think, like Carson, I think you're right, is like maybe it's time you get Pick is a great backup goaltender. You get somebody in there.
You only have so much time because, again, the years keep going, and you don't have an unlimited amount of time with like the players you got.
You just don't look at the offensive players as saying, well, you got to look at your goaltending too. No. And if the Oilers have a shot, whether it's in free agency or whether it's in trade, of getting that guy,
they might do it.
They might pull the trigger, and I don't want that.
Whatever helps them win, because you want to look at the games maybe that hold them back from doing more, because they're scoring 4 goals but they're allowing 5.
Yeah,
and it's like, well, we want the goalie that can maybe stop those 2 and keep it.
And see, back in the '80s when it was Fuhr and Moog, you know what? The guys let in six goals a night, sometimes 5 goals a night, but that team can score 7 or 8 goals easily. So it was never a goals against average team. Mm-hmm. But I think nowadays you got to win those. You got to win those 3-2, 2-1 games. And even though the Oilers have done that, and Stu and Pick have done that, I think you're right, Carson. I think maybe
you get better look at it.
You get just kind of take a look at it, and it's just like with any, like you look at players that get traded all the time. Well, I wonder why they made that trade. Well, they see something that other people don't. So,
and again, this league is evolving, so the game is different back then. There were a lot more goals.
Yep.
As much as there's talented goal scorers now, it's a goalie's game. The goalies are the reason that the Stanley Cup champion is crowned.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, as the games go down, as the series keep going, you see the goal scoring go down and down and down and down, for the most part, of course. So I think that's something they might explore, but you never know. I mean, he could also, again, find more of his groove. But I just feel like for him, that's his one thing that he has to just get by, is just that once he allows a goal or two, it's just he just allows too many.
If he comes on in these last third of the season, like he did in the last third of last season, then there's no problem. But
that's an if he's going to.
If you're right, if he lets in a goal or two and it gets him rattled, he calms down, but
that's already the damage is done.
Yeah, damage is done.
Well,
by the way, the Oilers playing tonight against St. Louis at 7, tomorrow in Chicago, back-to-back at 8:30, and then Friday at home to Colorado, and then it's the Four Nations break.
Well, I remember at least last time y'all played in St. Louis, the penalty fest game.
Yeah.
But, well, I think that pretty much sums it up. Again, we talked about a lot of stuff. Four Nations again beginning. We're really excited for that.
As you can tell.
Yep. Really excited for those games.
Might have a hat coming too.
Going to be watching them for sure. We'll be talking about those. We can still probably still do some stuff.
Well, there'll be news around the NHL.
There'll be news around the NHL, and then we'll maybe talk about like what we want our teams to do and how the tournament's going. Who are the standout guys in the tournament, or maybe the guys that are kind of underperforming.
The podcast will be there next Tuesday.
We don't stop this podcast until the last day of the Stanley
Cup finals are over, and then even that we do a wrap up. We'll be here for the Four Nations. We'll be here talking NHL.
I'm ready for Four Nations.
Yeah,
you got to go Canada, man.
I know. I'm so excited. This is the only time I've been excited for the All-Star break ever. Yeah. We'd like to again thank everybody for joining us tonight. Lance and Beth were with us tonight. You can be with us too every Tuesday night, 5:45 Central Time. If you want to go Eastern, that's 6:45 Eastern Time. Now, you're always about the East. No wonder people in Canada don't like the eastern part of the country, and that's the truth. I'm not exaggerating. From Manitoba west is the good part. Ontario east, except for the Maritime provinces, that's the bad part. So it's basically Ontario and Quebec. There's a little political advertisement from me. You can catch us next week. You can get us here, the Best Boy Center Ice Podcast, YouTube, on the Refocused Radio networks tomorrow. Also on there is Shemaya Reed's I Am Refocused Radio, and Rudy Campos Jr. Rudy, we took some of your thunder with the NBA. You can get Sweep the League on there. You can we'll do some TikTok stuff. You can find us both on our personal Facebook pages. Carson posts a lot of stuff. And I post a lot of stuff, and we'll just join us back here again next Tuesday night for the Best Boy Center Ice Podcast and Carson's favorite time of the show. In the meantime, and in between time, everybody have a great hockey night.
Gotta love the Leafs.
I don't like the Leafs. The laughs, the Toronto Maple laughs. Yeah, you're right.